The first voice she heard was her mother's. A fever took the woman when the girl was 7, and in the hour of death, the child heard every unspoken word, the regrets, the fears, the love that had no time to be spoken. The sound lodged in her skull like a splinter. It never faded. As she grew, other voices joined. A miner crushed in a collapse, a woman drowned in the river, a boy thrown from a horse. She could not silence them. She could only listen. The town called her a grave robber of the soul. They threw stones, burned her small hut, drove her into the wilderness. She found a cave in a remote canyon, far from human voices, and there she lived for 10 years. The dead still came to her, not in person, but their final words floated on the wind, carried by something she could not explain. She learned to sort them, to file them away, to not let them drive her mad. He rode into her canyon on a horse the color of ash. A second horse followed, saddled but empty, its reins tied to his. He was tall, lean, with a beard that had not been trimmed in months. He did not speak. He dismounted, walked to her cave entrance, and held up a scrap of paper. The wind almost tore it away. She read, "My wife was murdered. I never heard her last words. Will you listen for her?" She had been asked many things. To heal, to curse, to leave, to die. No one had ever asked her to listen. She looked at the man's face. His eyes were not pleading, not desperate. They were patient, as if he had been waiting years for this moment. She nodded. He handed her a folded cloth. Inside was a lock of dark hair, tied with a red ribbon. "Whose?" she whispered. He wrote, "Hers. She gave it to me the day we married." She took the hair to the mouth of the cave, where the wind was strongest. She closed her eyes and opened her ears. The dead spoke constantly, a river of final words. "Tell my son I'm sorry. The money is under the floor. I never loved him." She filtered through them, searching for a voice that matched the hair. Nothing. She tried again the next day and the next. The man waited, silent, patient, sleeping beside his horses. On the 4th night, a storm rolled through the canyon. Thunder cracked the sky. Lightning illuminated the walls. And in the chaos, a voice rose above the others, soft, trembling, young. "Tell Eli I was not afraid. Tell him I loved him until the last second. Tell him the man with the scarred hand did this." She gasped. The voice faded. She ran to the cowboy, grabbed his arm. "Eli," she said. He stared. He had never told her his name. She repeated the words. She said she was not afraid. She said she loved you. She said the man with the scarred hand did this. Eli fell to his knees, his body shaking with silent sobs. She knelt beside him, unsure what to do. He took her hand and pressed it to his heart. It was pounding like a trapped bird. She held on until the storm passed. When dawn came, he wrote, "Who are you?" She told him her name. "Raven," she said, "because I listened to the dead." He stayed. He built a small shelter beside her cave, not because he needed to, but because he could not leave. He told her through writing that his wife's murderer was still alive, a man with a scarred left hand who had robbed their homestead. The sheriff had done nothing. Eli had hunted the man for 2 years, lost his voice from screaming his wife's name in the wilderness. He had given up on justice. He only wanted to know that she had not died hating him. Raven continued to listen. The dead woman's voice came more clearly now, as if she knew her husband was near. She described the killer's face, his horse, the direction he had fled. Raven wrote it all down for Eli. He read the words, his hands shaking, and looked at her with something she had never seen in a living person's eyes. Gratitude so deep it looked like grief. "Will you help me find him?" he wrote. She nodded. She had spent her whole life hiding from the dead. It was time to help the living. They rode out together, following the ghost's directions. Raven listened as they traveled, the dead woman guiding them through canyons, across rivers, past towns where the killer had left his own trail of bodies. Eli did not speak, but he did not need to. His presence was enough steady, warm, a wall against the cold voices that had haunted Raven for so long. She began to sleep through the night for the first time in years. They found the man in a saloon in a town called Dead Horse. He had a scarred left hand, just as the ghost had said. Allie drew his gun. Raven put her hand on his arm. "She wouldn't want you to become him," she whispered. Eli hesitated. The killer saw them, reached for his pistol. Eli fired first, not to kill, but to wound. The man fell, screaming. The sheriff arrested him. Justice was served, not revenge. That night, Eli wrote to Raven. I heard her voice. Not with my ears, with my heart. "Thank you," she smiled, tears in her eyes. "She's at peace now," Raven said. "I can't hear her anymore." Eli took her hand and wrote, "Then listen to me." She closed her eyes. He had no voice, but his silence was the loudest thing she had ever heard. It said, "Stay." It said, "I need you." It said, "You are not cursed. You are a miracle." They returned to the canyon, but they did not stay in separate shelters. Eli built a cabin with 2 rooms, one for sleeping, one for listening. Raven continued to hear the dead, but their voices no longer tormented her. They were visitors, not jailers. She learned to welcome them, to help them find peace. Eli learned to read her expressions, to know when a spirit was near, to sit beside her in silence until the voice faded. He proposed with a piece of paper. "I cannot speak my vows, but I can write them. Will you marry a man who will never say your name aloud?" Raven kissed him and said, "I have heard 1,000 last words. Yours will be the only first words I need." They were married in the canyon, with no witnesses but the horses and the ghosts. She spoke for both of them. He wrote his responses. The dead watched and, for once, were silent. They had a daughter, a girl who was born laughing. Raven feared the child would inherit her curse. But the girl heard nothing, no ghosts, no final words, no whispers from beyond. She was free. Raven wept with relief. Eli held her, his hand on her back, saying nothing. He did not need to. His touch said everything. Years later, a young man rode into the canyon. He was the son of the scarred man, come to apologize, to make amends. Eli listened to his words, then wrote, "I forgave your father the day I found peace. Go and live." The young man wept. Raven invited him to stay for supper. The ghosts of the canyon, including Eli's first wife, watched from the shadows. They did not speak. They simply smiled. Eli died first, old and quiet, in Raven's arms. His last written words were, "I heard you, every day, without ears. I heard you." She buried him beneath the cottonwood, then sat beside his grave and listened. The dead spoke, as they always did. But among them, she heard a new voice, silent, yet unmistakable. It was his. He had finally found his voice in death, and he was saying her name. Raven lived another decade, becoming a legend among the frontier's outcasts. People came from miles away to ask her to listen for their lost loved ones. She never charged money. She only asked for stories. She said that the dead were not to be feared. They were to be heard. And she had been given the greatest gift, to be the ears of the voiceless. When she died, her daughter buried her beside Eli. The grave reads, "She heard the dead, but she loved the living." And one silent cowboy taught her that the loudest words are never spoken. Travelers still visit the canyon, hoping to hear the ghosts. Most hear nothing. But some, late at night, claim to hear 2 voices, one speaking, one silent, laughing together in the dark. The woman who listened to the dead finally found a voice of her own, and she used it to say, "I love you," for the rest of eternity.